and whole bunches of other people. Where's Marissa?
She's on, Marissa's on.
Marissa's on, okay. Marissa will take that attendance for us. I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And now I'm looking for a motion to approve the minutes. Now, there is a mistake in the regular minutes for the April 7th meeting, and if you find it, you get a prize. Mrs. Creedon will give you the prize. As soon as Marissa got it out, 5 minutes later, on Bing. And
So it's something to do with Forbes. No? That's it.
Okay, we don't have time for guessing games. The where the superintendent talks about the diversity and equity committee. It's listed as the diversity.
Oh, and
and
inequity.
Committee.
Okay. I did not say that. I did not say that. Let's fix that.
Well,
Thank
that's what the
you.
minutes say. That's why we have to correct it. I'm sure you didn't.
Thank you. I appreciate that, John.
I'm sure you didn't. Mrs. Creedon, let me know about that right away. It proves that people actually read
Thank you.
these.
That's
I
great.
appreciate that.
Thank
But-
you.
Okay, motion to approve with that correction.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Any more mistakes? All those in favor?
Aye.
So it was Sue and then Jess?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And looking for a motion now to approve the minutes of the May 23rd.
Yep.
May
But that
3rd.
one has to be
Very brief.
with
Change,
yeah, agenda stricken and minutes instead.
Does that mean we have to? Oh, yes, it does say agenda. Yes.
front of me.
we need
I
to
don't
change
either.
that in the
Which
minutes.
one is this one?
And will someone make
Sure,
that
there it is.
motion
This one.
considering that change that needs to be made?
Oh, we're here.
You have it?
Brenda had any
Second.
Okay.
discussion? All those
So
in
that
favor?
was Jess and then Sue?
Yeah.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, public participation. Members of the public and staff may bring to the committee's attention information, ideas, or matters of concern related to all the duties and responsibilities of this committee. This committee will not allow comments regarding specific staff members or personal grievances. The time for individual remarks will be apportioned according to the number of speakers and will be limited to 5 minutes per speaker unless extended by the chair. No public at all. Any staff want to say anything? Okay. Then we will move on to discussion and next steps, which is school improvement plans, Forbes and Southwest. I think, Sue, I turn this over to you at this point for your.
Sure, thank you. And a big thank you to Joanne and Mary Ann for joining us tonight to share all the wonderful things that are happening at their schools. So ladies, if you want to just, Allie, you have their plans, right? Allie, thank you very much. Allie can display. We have hard copies for anyone in the room who needs them. You guys need a hard copy, you have it. And then I think you probably already have decided how you're gonna.
Yeah, we're team tagging. We're.
Well, I'm used to being up and moving around, but Joanne's like not ready for the choreography and me standing. We plan speaking, not choreography, so, but thank you all for allowing us to be here this evening. So you'll see on the board, the Forbes plan, with Southwest as well. There's so many similarities and then there's uniqueness of each of our schools. So we kind of wanted to go through and share about that. But our priority goals are the same, okay? Love the model format of our, our sister school, Global Wetmore and Torrington, but then we are cousins, stepsisters, or something. We share staff and we share curriculum. And it's so great to have that partnership, that collaboration time, our incorporating the work of our coaches. It's just, it's so meaningful and we've come far because of the models that we're setting up. So we're excited about that. So if you look at our priority goals, you know, they are the same. We'd like to guarantee instruction that's student-centered, rigorous, meaningful, responsive to all students' needs, and fosters the development of critical thinking. argumentation, collaboration, and transference through a blended learning approach. Our second one is to foster the family engagement via the ongoing communication and support. And our third is to identify, monitor, and provide support, intervention, and guidance to students with chronic absenteeism or at risk for chronic absenteeism. So what we want to do is just share what each one of us is doing on these three priority goals. So like the first one about the instruction. Our data is very similar. Our student body is similar on so many levels. I think it's so, I mentioned it at the very beginning, it's so important to stress that the model we have where we can work collaboratively is key, because we've been able to provide those common assured learning experiences for our 4th and 5th graders, not only within our building, but across both buildings. So that was something.
Yeah, and this work started before COVID, but certainly experiencing COVID really forced us to collaborate to a greater level, but has set the pattern that we want to continue, because it's been very effective that all of our teachers are working with the coaches, and I cannot say enough for our coaches, about our coaches. Don Paluccio and Mary Svets-Giuliano have really facilitated and guided the work in looking at data. We look at our STAR data, our unit assessments, our ESPA interim assessments, IABs, just so you need another acronym, not, but and throughout the year, the coaches have guided all of our teams of teachers to look at the data and then to target instruction. And our goals for the year were set upon looking at our data at the beginning of the year. So for 4th grade, well, for math, it's been a focus on fractions and understanding of fractions, equivalence of fractions, and facility with using fractions, because that was determined to be really a key area of need for our 4th grade. I mean, for our math. And then for humanities, it's identifying main idea and supporting details. And that is key. That's both in informational text and literary text. So that's been great work that our coaches have led.
Also, very excited with the Office of Teaching and Learning that kind of helps drive the ship and steer us, working directly with us and the coaches is vital. That new office role this year, I think is this stable thing we kind of needed that's been missing for a while, so that we can be narrow focused on where are we going academically, what are we doing, and where are we going socially, emotionally, what's our goal, where are we going to be in a few years, and we're making progress. So we're excited about, for example, our WIN block, the What I Need Now block. We've put that in place based on some feedback, and we've been able to incorporate some activities that can help the kids who are want to accelerate a little bit versus those who are trying to fill the gaps. With a project-based activity that one class in my building is doing is the blessing bag, or reaching out throughout the community. They research what's needed at the homeless shelters. What are the items? They price things out. They work with the community to find out where we could best get them. They started a drive of the activities, so the schools get involved to help with this. It's just fun to see them embrace something beyond themselves. And it's every learner has a role in it. Every student has found where they can fit in to make this work.
If I could just jump in, what's really beautiful about that is that there's a direct connection to the curriculum and to the academics, to the standards. And then the children, are, as Marianne said, it's a project-based learning experience. So they're applying what they're learning, they're synthesizing their information, and they're doing something valuable for their community at the same time.
Very much so. We talked about that whole length with it.
But the incorporation of What I Need Now block has been so key in providing small group instruction. And that's really how most of our teachers are using most of the WIN block, at least at 4th. But it's been very effective. So that's been wonderful.
We both have the extended day program after school, the Power Up program that's been started, which has been very instrumental. So we're excited about the level of commitment and volunteer, the kids who are doing that. And the families who agreed to, yes, we want to help our children. Our coaching cycles, we started piloting a coaching cycle in our building. So I would say Mary Beth Giuliano worked with Mrs. Wolfsweiger and Mr. McCotter this past year, really getting into the classroom, talking about how to improve instruction and delivery of instruction, measuring the student learning. How do you know they're really getting it? Are you hitting that learning target? I was speaking to one of the teachers last night, and she just said that was one of the best experiences I've ever had. And she's a well-seasoned, very talented teacher. And she goes, I still learned more about myself.
That's great.
Yeah.
I do want to mention the social emotional learning because we have incorporated that in our schedule. Every day we start our day with an SEL period, which is it's a community meeting time, but it's based on the Second Step program, which is a curriculum that has really guided the students towards becoming independent learners, more empathetic, working on just basic social skills. It's great. I walked into a classroom the other day and a student was getting frustrated and he said, I'm using my calming techniques. I'm going to be okay. I'm using my calming techniques. So the fact that it's being taught as a separate period, but yet integrating throughout the day. And that obviously is the goal.
I had a student then teach me how to use the calming technique. I said, show me how you do that. I need help. So it was fun to do it that way too.
That's
and
cute.
We know he really knew what he was doing. We'll go through the fostering the family engagement.
So family engagement, just to launch this, I think this year, oh my goodness, our teachers have been in everybody's living room and our students have been in our teachers' living room or bedrooms or whatever, so family engagement is alive and well. There are some standard pieces that everybody's always working on to communicate student or class success, and that's using apps such as Dojo or Remind, emails, newsletters, of course. We did spend time analyzing parent and student surveys earlier in the year to determine where we were strong and what areas we needed improvement in.
And that we were able to do jointly as both of our schools together and looked at the district-wide survey feedback. And then we broke off into our own groups to look at our individual schools and analyze how it looked in our building, how it looked in Forbes. And the teachers then gave feedback that we all got to then bring up again at future staff meetings. What did we learn from this? What can we work on?
One of our challenges has always been how do parents really understand what it is that the students are learning in the course of a day or a unit? And of course, when we've gone remote, or for those students who are remote only, they see it, they live it. But for the students who are in person, that's not always quite so easy. And so there has been a big effort to make sure that before every unit, the coaches have prepared information to be shared on what the focus of the unit is, what some of the activities will be. And then some of our teachers do a unit review in the evening, like before a unit assessment, so that everybody and their parents can hop on the Zoom and run through practice problems. And that's really a very effective way to see what exactly is happening. And because the way school was any number of years ago is not the way instruction is delivered. And especially, I think this is true, especially in the math. There's so much emphasis on the explanation of your thinking and supporting your answer with evidence. So that's key.
I want to share even like another family connection and an enrichment activity. Like last night, it was the Paleo Knowledge Bowl team that I got to hop on that and see what Diane Hart at her school is offering to students in my school as well as her school. And that's the greatness about the technology, so we can still blend the school for enrichment activities above and beyond the school day. And oh my gosh, I learned more about Megalodon last night than I ever learned about Megalodons.
The last month I went on their field trip to Yale.
And they were
So-
communicating with a gentleman from Brazil.
Yeah,
Right,
that's
right.
great.
So the kids are getting exposed to so much that we never imagined.
Yeah.
So that's exciting.
And sorry.
Why don't you talk about your committee, because I'm getting there for our committee.
Okay, well, it's an effort of our committee. So we do have a Forbes School Equity Committee,
Mhm.
which took off last June, I guess, as a way for voluntarily folks could come together, look at webinars, discuss literature, talk about the events of the world, support each other, answer questions. We did have our Culture is Beautiful founders, Effie and Gaza Milando, come and join us. So we're just looking for how to increase our understanding of our wonderfully diverse community and the home cultures, and that's where it fits into here. Obviously, we want everybody to understand that not everybody lives like you do, not everybody thinks the way you do, and herein lies our wonderful richness as a community. So the Equity Committee just kind of spearheads our efforts and works in that way.
We're going to continue our work with our PTO. So grateful for the work our families do to help support us, raise money for some enrichment activities. Right now, there's virtual activities we're looking at, but just to broaden that network, work more with these families and our teachers together for our children is just great. So we're excited about where we're going with that. We also we're trying something a little different this year. We're with the transition from like 3rd, 4th grade, and then 5th grade to middle school. Our 4th grade teachers may be creating some type of a video, like a virtual tour, and do a Q&A session with students so that the kids can ask, well, what's Southwest really like? Yeah, so
Right.
you know, Mr. Michelson and I brainstormed a couple ideas. We've been talking to a couple of our 4th grade teachers, so we're trying to gel and bring all that together too, just to see what we can do. We talk about another level of help for us has been these supervisors of special education. The fact that they're matched with our sister schools, so that they're in the PPT meetings at both schools really helps us build for how we best placing these students where their service is going to be best met. Because some only need support in language arts, some only need it in math, some, you know, how many hours of support. So we're building that map based on matching kids to the needs for scheduling purposes for next year too. So there's a lot of behind the scenes legwork that goes into building the future of where we're going.
Right. And having the supervisors who are with both schools, they know the families, they begin to build those relationships at the K-3 level, which can continue to 4-5. Because it is a challenge being a 2-year school, because one year they're transitioning in and the next year they're transitioning out.
Right.
So we want to help the students as much as possible.
Right, so 50% of our student body changes every year.
Yeah.
Right.
Which has its pros and cons. That's all you want to look at.
Yeah.
So-
Depends on the year.
Yeah.
But we have the families for several years, which is kind of neat.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on to 3. Chronic absenteeism.
Everybody's favorite.
Mhm.
So like something in there that we're doing within our building, and you know, we do have our weekly attendance committee meetings. There are different things we did at different times, when we were full remote versus hybrid versus full in person, and still having distance learners. So for example, in our building, we were trying to, our teachers are our first connection to the families, and if the child is absent, and they're doing the outreach to the parents and trying to get their child connected or engaged. If we produce attendance absence list every day, our school nurses are then the backup to help with some of those phone calls. And now that we had a second nurse helping out this year, that was really nice to have a second person. So when we started seeing repeats that we weren't getting connections with, our nurses helped with that. And then my social worker, myself, my secretary, were kind of the next tier that we were really trying to delve in even deeper to find out what's really going on. And there's been some home visits, there's been tons of calls, tons of emails, finding out where they are even located. You know, we found our family in Las Vegas. So we worked on that. It's all good. It's all good, you know, and the transfer occurred. So it was like we were successful in helping these families transition to their next chapter in life. You had to keep the lines of communication open with them all.
Right.
So that's all, but it takes a lot of time and energy. So we're gonna keep tackling these attendance issues.
That's something that's been in every major newspaper in the country, actually.
Yes.
The districts all over the country are grappling with this very thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Children, you know, logging on from different time zones and,
Yeah.
yeah, and we have that. I mean, we have that happening here too.
And just the other thing I would add about our absenteeism this year is that it's definitely been a challenge with the changes from one mode of instruction to another, and quarantining, and there are some students who did very well in a remote setting, and then there are others who, anytime we went remote, they kind of dropped off the radar. And then we'd have to, again, use this team that we use, our nurse, our social worker, our secretary, our principal, or whoever, you know, and always starting with the teachers. But the amount of calls and emails and reaching out, I think, by all parties has been just phenomenal and really important. And just speaks to how it is a team. It's a community, and we need to continue to work on building community and strengthening and working with the greater community outside of the school, but the Torrington community, to provide and to support our families.
I think we both agree the amount of work our teachers and our staff do beyond classroom hours is mind blowing. I mean, the days don't end, and they are really pushing just to make these kids stay connected with them somehow. We're very excited that we had half the class return to in-person learning this past week. And to sit in that class meeting today, the kids' response to being back in the building, they were sharing that they're sleeping better. You know, we didn't expect that. 2 kids offered that they're sleeping better. They're like, we're tired, but it's a nice tired, and we're not on technology all the time and having the glitches that happen with technology. They love the technology, but there's challenges with it when you're on it all the time.
Right.
So that was just healthy for us to hear that the kids made that note about their own growth. At, 5th grade level.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So, but we had 17 kids return just this week alone, and we were able to keep them with that same class because it was they came back for testing last week and wanted to come back in person, and the hours that those teachers did communicating with every single one of those families was amazing. And then we had to see, can we make it happen so they would still have the same teacher? Will we have that ample class size at both sides of this? And it worked out beautifully. So we
That's
really,
Good.
so very exciting.
But you mentioned technology, and we would be remiss not to mention how valuable our IT department has been and making sure everybody has a device, that works, they can swap them out. The
have an IT person in the
hotspots to have the internet access.
Yeah.
I mean, that was huge. And I think some of our chronic absenteeism for the year at the beginning of the year was because of some of those issues which have been resolved. But again, thanks to the hard work of Ally and her team. I want to just do a shout out for our IT department. And all of this it works together, right? The engaging instruction and the social emotional and the working on getting kids in and making sure they feel safe and happy. It's just so, although there are 3 separate priority goals on this plan, it's really, they're so interconnected.
That's good, as they should be. If you're dealing with the same age group and curriculum and everything else.
Questions?
I have a couple, nothing major. Just my own curiosity. For example, on priority goal 1, objective 1, with the percentages, and there's a significant one on the objective for students meeting proficiency in math and the STAR program at the two schools. And even on the reading one, the 10 and 15%, and then 15 and 8. Where do you come up with those goals within your teams with, working with your teachers and try to identify how those numbers come together? Yeah, Andrew's saying yes. Yes, yeah. Yeah, okay.
Would you like to chime in?
Absolutely.
Okay, go
Well, we
ahead.
also looked at the trends too from the fall
Yes.
to the winter,
Okay,
and we saw that students make significant growth. Typically, what we see in a year is maybe 2 to 3 percentage points higher. It's not much that you see, and we're seeing dramatic improvements here at both at Southwest and Forbes. So
with them
we're
being in
really
school.
pushing forward, and like they said, the work of the coaches in the classrooms, the combinatory experiences, the collaboration amongst the teachers.
Yep.
All of that has really allowed us to ensure that we're growing at much greater rates than ever before. So it's really amazing to see.
Why do you suppose there's a difference in, I'm not even sure which one I'm looking at. One of them, the STAR math program will increase by 15% and the other one by 8%.
Well, we were looking at some of the
The data.
historical data even
Yeah.
before that.
Yeah.
to see,
Okay.
As Joanne was saying, like fractions was just a big gap that, and then we looked at, well, what was our learning like this past year when we had kids with no technology until we got it in their hands during the pandemic? And
Okay, so
we
there
really
were-
wanted to take into consideration where we were pre-COVID and what can we
Okay.
do during this
Mhm.
time? And then now that we're one device district, now where we're going.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
yeah,
And this is just a little aside, and several people have already said this too, but while this has certainly been a crazy time and it's been challenging at best, right?
right.
There are so many lessons learned and takeaways and silver linings, right? That we were working toward doing what we thought was the right thing, but then when we were forced into collaborating like we've never collaborated
Right.
before and providing common experiences for kids because we had to, right?
Right.
We had to make this work. And
Right.
then we suddenly had the technology to be able to do that so that teachers from one school could really meet with teachers from the other without leaving their homes
Yeah,
to
anywhere.
do that. So all of these things, it's that, what's that expression? Necessity is the mother of invention or whatever. And that's really what happened. And I
Right.
think that's why we're seeing the major gains that we're seeing because
Because of that, we had. no
because,
choice.
right, so while I would
It's a
never
major-
wish this on us again,
Right.
it really took us to a new level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, as far as your remote staff, do you still, or students rather, I'm sorry, do you still have, I kind of know where you're at with Southwest, but your numbers for full-time remote, have you seen improvement in that?
Full-time remote,
Yeah,
you mean a decrease in numbers or just a success among the?
a decrease, well, how many are there still? And
Okay.
have you seen a decrease in numbers now that people are being vaccinated and everything is kind of turning the corner? Do you have more kids?
Yeah, right
coming
now,
in.
so I checked today, as of today, because we have had a lot of shift in the past 6 weeks. I think I had 26 students come back to in-person.
That's
Which is
great.
a huge shift.
Yeah,
So right now I'm at 27% remote. I have 83 remote students.
83.
But it
thought we
was
only
as
had like
high
80 something
as
in the district.
38 or something at one point. It was more than a third mid-year, at one
Okay.
point mid-year.
You're
900.
thinking of homeschooling.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, so we dropped two from a third down to about a quarter. I will say, a lot of people may not realize this, what was a great benefit too is being sister or stepsister schools or whatever we are. To balance our rosters, we have teachers from Forbes and teachers from Southwest as teams. So one's teaching the STEM side, one's teaching the humanities side, but they're in two different buildings and we're sharing
Great.
students to balance the rosters and make sure the kids stay
And actually,
connected.
I have a team that has a Forbes team. Both teachers are in Forbes school physically, And they have some Forbes students remote and some Southwest students
That's great.
remote.
That's great.
So we've really worked together in
To
spite
make
of
it-
ourselves, right?
Yes, I know. Good bumps, we got through it.
That's great.
Other questions? Yeah,
No, I'm good. Great reports.
Yeah, off the top of your head, if you don't know off the top of your head, that's fine. Yeah, like you have to, but, like, because we are looking at the ELA proficiency for fall 20 and winter 21. You know how these numbers compare to like pre-COVID numbers? I know it would be a different group of kids, but like your fourth, your fifth graders this year that were your fourth graders last year.
I think it's, well,
last
I don't know, Andrew, if you can answer that. I think they're pretty consistent. They're not terribly off from what pre-COVID or pre-COVID numbers were.
That's it, 'cause
I
like
think they're close.
obviously there's an improvement, but I didn't know if maybe it had gone down before it went back up, or if it's got a steady improvement, or.
Yes, I'm thinking back to our presentation, perhaps back in February, we did see a slight dip between, I believe it was winter 2019,
Yes.
2020 to fall 2020, and now we're starting to see the upward trend
Exactly
again.
right, because remember, these fall scores of 2020 are following everybody being home for all those months.
Oh,
Plus you get that traditional summer slide that happens any year, right?
Right.
So yes,
So
so,
I would anticipate that that would be what it was, you
Yes.
know, I just wasn't sure because it wasn't.
but it certainly bears out, right, what we all know, that the best place for kids to learn is in school.
Right.
Right.
Other questions?
Just have one. The SEL period, is that like in place of what would have been homeroom before, I guess?
Well, it's a little bit of an extension of homeroom, right? So instead of just doing a lunch count and taking attendance, we expanded that time-wise so that we are following then this SEL curriculum and using it as opportunities to discuss the scenarios of the day or of the day before, what happened at recess, because those are some of our best scenarios.
And something too, if I may add on to that, SEL isn't just a one-time thing during the day, but we take, like the example Joanne was talking about, is that students are utilizing their strategies throughout the entire day, or how do teachers infuse SEL type strategies in reading, in mathematics. So we lay the foundation in the morning and look to see that throughout the day.
Great.
I dropped my granddaughter off this morning, 5th grade. And I said, so tell me about your day. And she was how the morning meeting was and the things that they discussed. And they say hello in a different language every day. And I said, so did they do German? She goes, I don't know.
Yeah, it's too early for those
But yeah,
questions.
and sign language, she was saying sign language. And so I thought that was, and she was
Sweet.
excited about it because that's how you start the day, to just get excited for the rest of whatever happens.
It's a great
The
way to
rest of the
start the
day.
day. Plus, it gives the teachers an opportunity to get a pulse on where students are before you just jump into your reading lesson or your math lesson.
Right, and
And
some
that's so
kids need to
important.
like calm down, others just need the stimulation to be able to, you know, join in.
Right.
So I think that morning meeting is,
I actually had a student approach me today about, can I go back to my check-in with our behaviorist in the morning? Said, I just kind of need it a little bit right now.
Sure.
Absolutely.
yeah, see, they know
great.
So they
themselves.
have
That's a
and
great
what they
thing,
need,
yeah.
that's great.
Yeah.
Right, and that's part of that curriculum, that self-awareness, it
Yep.
teaches that self-awareness, and
right.
that's so important. The kids can advocate for themselves and control their own, right, self-regulate, right?
And that's K-5 too, I want to make sure.
Yes.
You know, that's K-5.
And I think it helps them recognize it in someone else and then they help that other student, you know what I mean? So it's not like a label on them, you know what I mean? They just help each other, so they don't see it as anything different.
Oh, no,
They're
they
just helping.
don't. You should hear these kids, they'll
That's the
say, use your words. I mean, you can have a 5-year-old say, use your words. Yeah.
That's so cute.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's cute.
Did that
They
answer
tell
your
their mom
question?
that.
Right.
Anyone, anything else?
Great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity. Our staff worked so hard that it's really nice to be able to let you all know
Yeah,
what a
clearly.
great job they
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
Thanks for all you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
so
Thank
much.
you so
Thank you.
much.
Okay,
Okay, what's next?
next couple items are always on the agenda, the system-wide focus areas, attendance, student engagement, targeting student needs, anything to report there? Anything we
You
need to
just, I love these
hear about,
examples
know about?
because you get to see it in living time from Joanne and
Right.
Mary Ann. This is what's happening at the school site, so you get to see it
Perfect.
in living color. Yes,
Yep.
it's wonderful.
And that's it for,
That's it for the update of B. It's happening. We're moving forward.
delegated school improvement committee board goals, the ones we have decided to monitor. Implementation of district strategic plan, integration to the city strategic plan, once that plan, et cetera. So our part of this is mostly done and we're waiting for City Hall to, okay.
Yep, they're ready. We'll let
Monitor
you
and
know.
support middle school, high school building, blah, 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 blah. Anything new with pathways? Any new discussions about curricular components of that? Or-
Just the ongoing conversations that we're having and continue to have with community partners to try to, get that off the ground. So that's happening. At the high school, we've been working with Andrew Marchand. He's doing some outreach. We've been, in the OTL talking to people. So yeah, just that.
Okay. And oversee and support whatever is necessary to deal with the educational impact of the effects of prolonged distance learning. I think we heard a lot about that tonight. and It seems like
Yeah.
that's inherent to everything we hear about,
Right.
is dealing with that, so.
You also have a handle on it.
I
To
think
say the
we
least.
do, and we
Yeah.
might, if we get to that later, we can embellish a little bit. But I think we do. I think 6 months ago or even 4 months ago, we were just gathering information and kind of discovering, but along the way, we've been chipping away and making some progress. So yes.
Okay. And now D, something that's been, I think we put off last time.
Yes.
and We come to it with time enough to deal with it, at least to some degree. Civic virtue in the curriculum. Where do we find civic virtue?
I find it everywhere. in curriculum. I know that,
Yeah.
John, you said that you didn't expect us to prepare anything, but we did. So this has been gathering dust for a month. So actually, Andrew pulled this together for us. There's a
Okay.
set, and I'm sure many of you know this, but there is a set of standards around this. It's the C3 standards for social studies. So that's where
Couple of those.
a lot of this information comes from. But since Andrew authored this document, I'm sure he can speak to it for us.
Absolutely. So I was looking across our curriculum and looking for places in which civics are integrated. And as Sue mentioned, civics really are a part of all that we do. And going back to what Joanne and Marianne were mentioning about the second step program, for example, at K-5, kids are learning how to be members of a community and what that takes. But I was trying to look for explicitly where in the curriculum we find the integration of civics. And specifically, we find that in the C3 framework, which are the national standards for social studies. And in Connecticut, we have adopted the C3 framework, and a committee developed the Connecticut Elementary and Secondary Social Studies frameworks, which outline units of study by grade level. And so when we look at the C3 framework, we see that there are 4 major disciplines that are a part of the social studies. Those include civics, economics, geography, and history. And standards were specifically written for civics. If we go to Ally, the page, please, where we see civics at the elementary level, or the slide rather, I have given you some examples of standards written explicitly that involve civics. So for example, in first grade, the course title in social studies is Society and Ourselves. And a specific standard in civics is describe how communities work to accomplish common tasks, establish responsibilities, and fulfill roles of authority. In third grade, our third graders studied Connecticut and local history. One of the standards that they explore in third grade is identify core civic virtues and democratic principles that guide government, society, and communities. In fifth grade, we explore early United States history, and something that they do is explain how policies are developed to address public problems. That might seem more contemporary, but what we're really doing in fifth grade is examining early United States history to determine how did they establish laws, how did they establish democratic principles that we now can begin to understand how does that inform our contemporary lives. On the next slide, we can see some examples of civics at the secondary level. And I imagine not to put Ronnie on the spot, but she is very familiar with this as a social studies teacher and how she incorporates civics into her instruction. I don't know if there's something you want to mention.
Specifically, actually, when I look at this, the government systems, when we talk about different government systems, we do our Middle East unit and we look at Jesus as a leader and Muhammad as a leader. We bring in different ways of governing as we look at each one. So it's very interesting through history. And now we're getting to Mao. So there you have a big change from your monarchy to chaos to communism. So we bring it up all the time.
Right.
What's interesting is when we do governments, you always have a few kids that say, why don't we just have a monarchy? It would be easier. And I'll say you do, because I'm queen of the classroom. But this year we talked about changes in reflection. And I actually did say, if I'm teaching you all these systems and we are being a direct democracy, you guys are going to establish classroom laws and you're going to make your own. And we did it, and we post them, and they're in our Google Classroom, and they're there. And the kids own the laws, they made them. And I have had one class where they wanted to change a law, and then they had a discussion and they voted, and it's working. And there you explain how it works, and everyone needs to participate. And the ones with their heads down don't get a vote because you didn't vote. You know, it's good. It's good. But it's the C3 document. I love it.
It is amazing.
It is great, and it really helps us be better. Those standards, they're wonderful, and they're realistic.
They're rigorous, they're inquiry based.
Yeah, I like them.
Something that our fifth graders are currently doing is they are developing a 14th colony. And so they have to transfer everything they know about the development of the 13 colonies to create a colony that could sustain itself. And so thinking about what is the government we're going to establish, what policies and laws are going to be in place. And I just think of that as a really strong performance task for our students, because it really forces them to take the knowledge that they've learned and utilize that in a new novel situation. So this is a very brief overview of some of the ways in which civics are a part of the curriculum that I wanted to share with you this evening.
One of the things that is, I think, important to think about, and it might not just, might not be obvious to everybody, is that right from kindergarten, right, we start teaching the kids about community and what it means to be a good citizen and what it means to be a good neighbor, and about, the roles and responsibilities of the folks in our community, like the police and the fire and the government officials and that sort of thing. So it starts right from that level. I guess the point I'm trying to make is it's not just, civics is not only taught in 10th or 11th grade when our kids take that American Civ. So,
but then you hear about it too, like with the blessing bags.
Mhm.
That's civics in action.
Sure.
And so now you're building kids that are going to continue to participate and make their community better.
Right. Last year, when I was the assistant principal at Vogel Wetmore, we had started clubs, and one of those clubs was public service. And our youngest kids, kindergarten through third grade, were helping out at local charities and whatnot. Helping Hands, for example, they were thinking about how could we start a food collection. And so all of those really show how civics are a part of what we do each and every day in the classroom.
The Browns Fair, the Raider Rally is
That's
another
it,
great
right.
example. So,
Raider
yeah.
Rally's coming up in June. This weekend, the National Honor Society is doing a walkathon at the high school. I mean, it's the kids are really engaged and philanthropic, and it's good. And then, you know, at the high school, we have the civic learning expectations that are try to infuse them into the curriculum, you know, in the daily lessons when we can. And so it's all over.
Once upon a time, we had young Democrats and young Republicans as clubs. Are they at all active?
Yes, they're still active. We have actually elections for student council next week. I mean, that's a different examples.
Registrars still come into participate? They're old enough or not?
I believe they did, but I don't remember. Yeah, I believe that did happen.
Okay. Questions about any of this? Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Above and beyond with
Thank you.
a comprehensive report. Thank
We're
you.
a little bit of overachievers in this department.
Raise the bar too high.
Well, that's great because it trickles down.
Thank you, Ellen. Okay,
Um,
here's this.
Next item on the agenda is the continued membership of the Torrington Board of Ed in K. And this is something we said we would discuss at 6. And yet again, a report.
Well, we didn't offer this, we just pulled it off the website.
Why you need K.
From kids.
From Cave.
This is just
Yeah.
information.
Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
just really what they do, what they
Yeah.
offer, yeah.
Okay, you want to say anything about this, or is it self-explanatory?
It's not, I promise, it's not propaganda. It's just, it's really just informational. It did come directly from CABE. It's just an explanation of who they are and what services they provide.
Okay, what do we use from K? What does central office use?
I think it depends which of us you're talking to. I
Well,
mean,
right.
we
I know.
look to them for policy,
Professional
often.
development
Professional development,
opportunities,
yep.
PD.
updates on legislative
Mhm.
concerns and issues.
Is this something we could use?
Yes.
Right,
Yeah,
just looking at
because
these bullet
it's-
points, I mean, we ask
Right.
these questions all the
Well,
time.
this is technically our.
We don't
Yes.
use it though. We do.
Well, we individually.
You do.
Yeah.
We do? We do. Okay.
I mean, you can go on their website and read their stuff anytime you want. It's
They
not
do
free.
offer PD though for boards of education, right?
Yes.
And they
Mhm.
offer
Do you
conferences.
get emails from
Yes.
us? They send out
I assume
emails?
it's all on the email list. I get
I do.
incessant
You should.
emails.
You don't.
Yeah, every
Yeah.
day,
I don't know if
yeah.
I
Yeah,
do.
you should.
Yeah,
Okay.
practically
Oh,
every
because we
day.
registered you with them, so you should be getting.
And
I
in
don't think
particular,
I
like
do.
during COVID, they've offered these presentations and these gatherings, which I think have been helpful because board chairs can go or board executive teams. I've been able to jump in just to get some different perspective.
Sure.
I hear the superintendent's perspectives and I listen to or we gather once a week, but it's nice to get those. Usually it's once a month, just to get an update. Obviously, it's been more during the COVID time
Yeah.
because it's been
Mhm.
necessary.
That's great.
They also do webinars too that are free on different topics, so you can just pop in
Right.
and.
They
Right.
offer
Just
trainings
looking at
on
Marissa.
a variety of
Okay.
very current, relevant topics for school districts, school leaders.
New initiatives that are coming down the pike, what the expectations are going to be from the state. So it gives us a more robust perspective in terms of what's going to happen with the whole district, rather than just a one slice that we may receive from the State
That's
Department.
One other thing with respect to policy, I'm talking policy, we go to Shipman's Sample Policy Index first as our first go-to, but that's it's kind of skeletal, honestly. It's not all that comprehensive. And then Kim and I will often go to CABE next because they really have a very robust policy manual. And they often.
They address a lot of things in depth.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And very often what we find is that the policies, the sample policies that we pull off of CABE, we can then go, I do like a fact check with other district policies, like I might go to another district and look at their policy and it's taken directly from CABE.
Oh.
So just an aside, it's helpful in that way too.
Okay, assuage this concern, please. It seems like the legislative, we get a lot of legislative information from them about the bills that are in the hopper and what's going on. They don't seem to be very strong advocates, though, for the things that would be better for boards of education as opposed to the State Department of Ed or the legislators. Am I wrong about that?
I think they try and be neutral in
That's what I
terms
mean.
of
That's
what
exactly what I mean.
statement that they take, because different boards will respond in different ways. And as we've seen with COVID, there are 169 different ways of approaching something. So I think that they try and stay neutral and present the information and then let boards have their say and their discretion in terms of how they will implement or how they will adapt what they need within their district.
So from our point of view, they are advocating for probably the larger, from my point of view, they are advocating for the larger school districts and looking for things that don't necessarily benefit districts like ours demographically or economically. That might not be fair to them, but I think you're right, exactly right in the way you're perceiving it. They're neutral because they don't
try to
want
be.
to offend the large members.
Well, any one district, I don't know whether it's large or small. I think that they try and take a neutral stance to provide the information and then let districts and certainly boards make the decision on their own. And be more of that neutral party. They are sharing that information. That's what I think they see as their role.
And I suppose I'm saying we don't want them to be neutral. We want them to be advocates for, well, us actually, because the question is, what are we getting out of CABE? And we're getting a lot of procedural things out of CABE.
Procedural, informational,
Yeah,
trainings,
informational,
right,
policies,
to let you
etc.
make the decisions. This is Connecticut after all, and they will not say, okay, you need to do X, Y, Z in any way, shape, or form. That's been a hallmark of Connecticut, and having 169 districts make up their mind in terms of how they will move forward. That's really been the State Department's perspective as well, as you've seen during COVID many, many times.
Our friends at the state teachers in the audience are laughing.
And I do think that we have to push them also to push the agendas that are important to us. So, I mean, I'm not sure how we would have gotten through the pandemic had we not had access to all those calls every week in the beginning. And as John knows, I didn't agree with a lot of the stuff, but we got the information timely, that I'm not sure how else we would have gotten the information. Farther in, they ended up opening it up to all towns, even if you didn't pay CABE membership. I don't want to say annoyed me, but a little bit it did, because we had all paid and they were all getting the same services. So I didn't really think that was right. But when they created that board chair listserv, to me, it's not really a CABE function, but it's a way for every board chair in Connecticut to communicate, which we've never had before. But so they created it, but now the board chairs are using it all the time. So several times a week you get something. There was proposed legislation about allowing kids to have 4 mental health days without parental consent was the original. So one of the board chairs had saw it, sent it out and said, what is this? Contact your legislators. You know, you can't have kids taking days off in first grade and not without the parents' consent. So then they all started getting in action and they had some letters and signed this letter. So I think those things have been helpful, but I'm not sure exactly. CABE created it and then it's kind of carried.
It's sort of the Wild West in some ways.
Sometimes it's crazy, yep. But it has given us insight to things coming up. So even on some of those calls, I'm just gonna use the CIAC, the crazy summer thing, like, we probably wouldn't have known about that had we not been on that call. And everyone on that call perceived differently, like, this is a good thing, this is a bad thing, but at least we got the information, I think is the point, and then we can decide what we want to do with that information.
That's what bothers me is that they purport to speak for Connecticut boards of education, but frequently don't speak for us, and I'm sure for many other boards,
Right.
philosophically at least. What does it cost us a year?
14,000.
14,000.
I guess I'd be curious to know what we would actually lose if we didn't do CABE for the, like the listserv, you have that. Like they've opened some things up to boards. I don't know if that's going to continue, but I mean, I struggle with CABE because I've read through a lot of their stuff and I feel like they're very biased in one direction when it comes to political stuff, and they're very active politically. And I have a hard time with us funding that out of our budget. And so I just wonder, dollars and cents wise, $14,000 is a good chunk of money. I mean, do we get $14,000 worth of resources out of them? Or if we took that $14,000 and spent that on the things we needed and didn't give it to CABE, would we end up basically in the same place?
I could say just like looking at just policies, so I'm not gonna talk about anything else, but just policies. So if we had to have Shipman write us a policy, one policy, you're probably talking $1,000 bill
Right.
for one policy. That's hard because with COVID, it's hard to judge because we haven't been operating as normal like we normally would do in this period of time, probably 7 or 8 or 9 policies maybe. But we haven't had so it's hard to gauge that.
And
But
that's just one example.
That's
of
just
what
one
it would cost
example.
us if they were to write us a policy.
and then
then you
$1,000.
use
That's
it.
just one service, right?
Right,
that they
exactly.
offer. I use it all the time.
Mhm.
I think Tim uses it
I've
more than I
attended at
do.
least a dozen webinars this year that were free that
Otherwise would have cost
otherwise would have cost,
something.
for
Right.
each webinar. So, and oftentimes in the non-COVID world, those would sometimes be in person.
Mhm.
Might not be that many, but they would
Right.
still be valuable.
Right.
And it's incredibly valuable to have that opportunity.
We did, when it came up at the last meeting, when it was raised, we did do a little bit of searching and tried to find out, what their membership looked like. And I think that honestly, we
Oh, it's a
found,
lot.
I think there are very few districts in the state that are not CABE members, very
Right.
few.
Yeah, just a
Eight.
handful. Yeah.
Yeah, so just to throw that out there.
And it's just part of the networking. It just really helps you, even when you're going through budget, to really touch base with other districts and to have that information and have that venue to say, okay, what are you doing? What are the ideas? What's out there? How are you problem solving this? Because in these next 2 years, we have a lot of money, but then it's really good to have conversations about what other ideas are out there with other board members, and then certainly with board members and superintendents together, working on these issues, because these are tough issues. It's tough times, obviously. I don't have to tell you, you sit through all of these meetings. So it's nice to have that support in that network. So it's more of a networking agency.
Are there restrictions to how many licenses are offered, or is it just open to anybody in the district?
Some of the stuff they charge for, but so all the board members can have full access to all their information. So if you're not getting it, we'll get you fixed so that you're getting it.
Okay, I'm just wondering, like, if if it's just being used in central office, I think it's great. I don't see that we should get rid of it, just based on all the benefit you've had over the last couple of years. And how long have you had the membership in the district? How long have we had
It's been
that?
forever. I think there's only 1 or 2 years that it got cut from the
They cut
budget
it,
and then.
yeah. Right, and
Went
then we
back
brought
in.
it back
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
of the gap
The
that
benefits.
we didn't have, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's gone up a lot too. The price was $10,000 before.
Okay, anyone have anything else to say or ask before we move on?
I mean, I think the other part, and, so like, I work during the day, so I can't take advantage of a lot of their daytime seminars, but there are a lot of things we could utilize that we don't.
Yep.
And we get the emails for them. I don't know the warrant of those, if they're good or not good, because I've never attended, but
Kim has
Kim
something to
has,
say.
right.
No, but I was just also gonna say, for reference, they're always all recorded and you always have access as a
Right.
member to
Oh,
go back and watch
To go
them
back and
after.
watch it.
So even if you can't attend in person, you can watch it after, because that I've done several times this year too.
Right.
Because I can't always do it during the day, so then I go home at night and I actually will watch the recorded webinar of something. You still have to register for it that you wanna be there,
Right.
but just so you know, for future reference.
That's
Yeah.
good to know.
It's, it's really a great resource.
Yeah, they host, I think twice a year, they host a statewide,
Yeah.
huge conference. My sister's on a board in Bristol and, you know, they go every year and it's an opportunity for, you know, boards of education across the state to physically come together and, you know, share experiences and frustrations and, you know, celebrations and.
And a lot of times they're providing, the conference will be about new initiatives from the state. So whether it's vision of a graduate or student success plans, any of those types of things, they'll run a seminar on how other districts are handling it, best practices, how to get there the easiest way. So it helps give you a roadmap.
And they have the legislative breakfast every year, and this year they did it electronically over Zoom, and that it didn't work as well, but they do try to do things like that. And there's a whole governance structure that we don't take advantage of, that Torrington just doesn't participate in too. Of course, this part of the state is sort of the hinterland to them. I think over the last few years, they've had for only a few months, one delegate from this part of the state. So that's been a problem. Maybe if we had somebody around here pushing that more, we'd see that they were more valuable than they seem to be, from my point of view.
I also think like there's not a chance in anywhere that I would have been able to directly ask the Commissioner of Education questions throughout this process. And most recently, last week, we had the interim, the newly appointed commissioner. Like there's never a chance that I could call the office and get to talk to this person, but in this format, I mean, I asked some pretty direct questions last week, John, and, you know, but we wouldn't have that opportunity.
Right.
So even if we don't always agree with CABE, it provides us another avenue to put our concerns out there that, you know, they may not be concerned about this, but we are in the field. So, I mean, we probably had access, I would say 13 times in a year to either the commissioner, the assistant commissioner, the turnaround officer. And they pointedly had to answer the questions we had. So I don't think we would have had that opportunity
Without that.
otherwise.
And I'm assuming we had it in the budget, right?
Yeah.
It was in your
Yeah.
budget, so,
Yeah, just part of our membership.
right. And we already voted on the budget, so do we have to vote on this again?
Well, we had said at the beginning that we would discuss this, because we can always drop out. We don't have to spend that money, even if it is budgeted. And that's what this discussion, which should have been held last month and wasn't.
Right.
That's what this discussion is about.
Except that once we get our number back from the city, we're going to be talking about budget again. So
Right.
hopefully
It never
not.
ends.
It never goes away.
Right.
It never
Yeah.
goes away. Okay, we're done with this. Website, how we doing? Ally? Tell us about
Here
these
we
things,
are,
please.
here we are. Ally, you have your piece, right? Ally's gonna throw it up on the screen. Okay, for the last month, 274 people viewed our Facebook page. We had 10 new likes with 10 new people. 2,500 posts reached our audience. 735 types of engagement. Ronnie will love this. 355 people watched our broadcast
great.
of the musical Niagara on demand, and 155
Wow.
watched it live.
That's
Oh,
great.
that's awesome.
Wow.
Wow, yay.
It was great. The, I know James Springer directed, I didn't direct this one. I feel like we have enough talent and we're trying to share talent and the kids need to get used to working with other people, not just me. So James Springer directed it and he and Connor did an amazing job with brand new material. And they worked with the creators. The creators were there through Zoom
That's
all
awesome.
the time during
great.
rehearsals. And they came, and one of the writers, actually, he came up from Savannah, Georgia, because he's at the School of Art and Design, and he came all the way up to see it. And
That's
we did it the
That's
very
amazing.
first time this has ever been on stage. We did it.
That's
Awesome,
great.
exciting, and our
That
kids
is
were great.
Awesome.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wow. I
Is
know.
it still
Congratulations.
online?
Yeah,
Ally
actually,
has it.
Ally just shared.
Good.
Posted, right?
I'll give you a little preview.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah, it's very, very moving.
And this is to the mother of the falls.
Can even understand the sound.
Every single time, every drop of dew is fresh every ride. So who cares if this time I hear the waterfall roll? On a jet ski for the homeless, for the homeless in California.
So the whole thing is online on YouTube, and we'll put it out on all our social media for people to watch.
Great.
And
Thank
it is
you.
on channel 22 as
Oh,
of
oh,
about 5 minutes ago.
Awesome. Good job, Ally.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you.
Okay.
Great job. I know, even with
We
the
all set
masks
on
and
this?
everything, it's beautiful.
Then we're moving on. Tag update. Laura, anything going on?
No, nothing new really. We have just gotten a couple more referrals in. So just working with the special ed team to complete the individual evaluations because we still do not have a group administered IQ. And I know that we're looking to have that for next year. So that will make identification much easier. So that's where we are right now.
Questions for Laura? Okay, thank you. Alliance update. What's new with Alliance?
We're good. Status quo. I talked, about our meeting last time, and we're still working through the rest of our budget, kind of finalizing, making sure we use every single penny of that money. So we kept with the plan this year, and then we'll start talking about next year and finalizing that budget and getting ready to submit that. So moving right along.
Okay, and finally, barriers to student success, a very broad
One
topic.
handout.
This has been tabled like 3 times.
Just gonna cook right through it.
Yeah, we're just gonna blow through this, okay?
No one's gonna stop this.
Exactly.
There you go.
I feel like this is
We got
yesterday's news a little bit, but that's okay.
It's
There's-
coming.
There's
No,
some
for
benefit
budget.
to that.
I mean, for a policy meeting. I can wait.
Ally, you have this, right? It was from the April meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So just to, just to refresh everybody's memory, the barriers to student success that you will see outlined in this document, in this presentation, were generated through the Grading Practices Committee. So these were things that our teachers brought back to the members of the grading committee and then were shared with us. So we listed them just as we received them. If we go through this packet very quickly, the beginning is the personal impact of the pandemic. And I wanted to include this because it was pointed out to me by someone who I really think of as a mentor, I look to as a mentor, it's Jonathan Costa from Ed Advance. He had a conversation with the assistant superintendents from across the region a couple of months ago, and said it might seem like overstating the obvious, but it kind of was like, wow, he's absolutely right. The impact of the pandemic has been different for different people. So I will say for me personally, it's been an inconvenience, right? My employment wasn't impacted to the point where I couldn't pay the bills. I didn't lose a family member to COVID. It certainly altered the way I went about my day-to-day life. It was a frustrating experience. So that was one group of people. But then for some others, including many of our students and many of our families, it really caused food insecurity and housing instability. And we know for sure, we know the names and the faces of our young learners who have been forced to be distance learners because their parents rely upon them to provide childcare for younger siblings and that sort of thing. So just to remind us, we try to be mindful of that all the time, that the impact has been different for different people. So try to think about that in terms of like that meter of, kind of where we fall. So when we look at the barriers to student success and the list that was generated by our teachers in the two secondary schools, we look through that lens. And in some ways, one of the lessons that we've learned as, administrators is that we have in fact created some of these barriers unintentionally, but we have created them. One example of that would be the Google Classroom page, for example. And while this may sound very minor, when you layer on all of the things that families have been dealing with, for some, it was the last straw. So what we mean by that is all of our teachers were put into a position where they were forced to create a Google Classroom. And they did a wonderful job. There are beautiful Google Classroom pages out there. I mean, some of them could win awards and be, hung in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I mean, these are some beautiful, beautiful examples of and lots of hours and effort into this. But what we learned through this experience is that, how many teachers do we have? 400 teachers. We have 400 very different and unique Google Classroom pages. And kids and families have had to learn to navigate 400 different, templates. So it really kind of dawned on us, because we were actually getting phone calls from childcare centers in town, from directors of daycares. You can imagine what I'm going to say. Listen, we've got 20 plus kids in our school age room right now, and we're going out of our minds because on every single Google Classroom page, the location of things is different, and we're ready to scream, could you please fix this? So that would have been a barrier that we created, right? We made things tricky and confusing, and that certainly was no one's intention.
Right.
So now that we know this, right, we've learned this, we've discovered this, we've gone through this discovery process, we can fix that. So now what we've done is we've reached out to all the teachers in the district and said, hey, this is what we found out. Who wants to help us rectify the situation? And we've had some volunteers from all the levels who have agreed to work on creating a common template district-wide, but at grade bands, so that it's appropriate for the different grade bands to fix this. And really, that's an easy fix, and it's one less thing that
So will like the high school have the same look and feel, and the middle school have the same look and feel, the
Exactly right.
elementaries? Okay, good.
yes. So that's the goal.
Yeah.
And
Good.
and we went, we invited anybody who wanted to have a voice in this to participate. So, I mean, this is something that we're just kind of rolling out to get going.
Yeah, that's great.
And the goal is to be able to have this completed
before school gets out so that, you know,
Yeah.
teachers have a chance to play with it a little bit, you know, and
Right, become
know,
familiar and.
we've been talking and hopefully we won't need to depend upon Google Classroom the same way we have throughout the last 18 months. But we don't see that it's ever going to go entirely away, at least not.
It's actually really
Yeah,
helps being
it is.
organized.
Right,
Yes,
right.
I love it. So people go, oh, I can't wait till it goes away. I can't wait to get rid of the computers. I just want to say there's a good side to them. And I find Google Classroom really helps kids. There's no papers to lose. Everything's dated. Your work's there for you.
Yeah.
That part's helpful. We actually found kids who were getting lost. Do you want to add something? And I'll be quiet.
I want to add to you, Google Classroom is also considered an LMS. It's a learning management system, right? So it puts everything like in one place, and I don't think it'll ever really
go away.
Helps the disorganized student.
It does. We found on our team, we tried something where we took the kids who were totally getting lost and not doing work. And instead of having a separate page for their core classes, we made one class, we called it Steps to Success, and we put all the work for science and social studies and ELA and math in one place for them, labeled by week. And we did this as an experiment with 6 kids who were kind of drowning in the work. 2 still didn't do anything. 2, it had a little modest success. 2, it helped so much that then they were able to figure out their regular Google Classroom and they don't use it anymore. So changing the template and the way that things are organized and having it the same really was a helpful thing.
Yeah, and you know, who knew, right? And that's just something really basic. The other things that you'll see peppered in here are some of the takeaways from the February professional development on grading. And I was actually talking with Sue about this morning. I almost feel like the word grading was a little bit misleading because it wasn't necessarily about grading as much as, or the conversation wasn't so much about grading as it was about consistency in practice and in expectation and in, you know, the structure of the course and that sort of thing. But you may remember, we did share, I think at one of the previous SIC meetings, some of the exit slips were around, you know, we pretty much reached consensus around allowing students to submit late work during this time, right? To allow students to submit late work without penalty within a finite period of time and those sorts of things. So those were listed here as barriers to student success only because of the inconsistencies in the district, because one teacher, let's say one biology teacher, allowed that submission of late work without penalty while another biology teacher may not have. So it was, again, students and families having to navigate and to remember and to just to try to keep all of that in their heads. You know, what are the expectations of this teacher? And so anyway, we're hoping, we did reconvene the grading committee last week for a discussion. And the next step for that is members of the committee are going to go back to their respective schools and again, speak to the teachers and come back with some recommendations for guidelines around those things. You know, submitting late work without penalty, allowing students to retake tests or quizzes. What were the other 2? I know, sorry. There were 2 others. We're not going near the zero, the whole conversation about the 0 and no grade lower than a 50. I mean, we've abandoned that for now.
Multiple ways to demonstrate their knowledge.
Oh,
is
right,
one.
that's right. Choice, multiple ways to show what they know, demonstration of mastery.
Yeah, exactly.
What we've seen too.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe Maureen, you should, if you don't mind, talk about the compliance issue, we have a childhood homework.
Okay.
Right?
Yes. So it's interesting when you have one-on-one conversations. So Andrew and I are often talking with the intervention teachers about what they're seeing too as they're helping students, because this year, because of COVID, we've had to run different things. We have ARC at the high school and we have these fun classes that are about getting homework done, like to call it fun. But one of the things that we've been told is like, as these teachers are trying to help kids pass classes in other teachers' classrooms, they're seeing things like students have, you know, passing grades on tests, but they haven't done the homework, so they're failing the class. And trying to help students navigate that challenge, but sometimes students aren't motivated because their feeling is they've passed the assessment. You know, so it's trying to engage those kids in those problems. And then the other thing is there's a little bit of a disparity in test scores. When you look at the STAR scores or things like that, and you see that the student's more than capable and they're receiving failing grades.
Or vice versa.
And then
Some kids don't test well either. You know, that's
Yep.
on that end of the coin, that's, you know, some adults don't test well.
And so now we have Performance Matters, which has been a great tool. So we're able, Andrew and I just did a whole spreadsheet for looking at the student's STAR score, and then for reading and math, and then their grades and attendance and discipline. And what we also found when we looked across this sea of red, orange, yellow, green, was that there are actually students who score very lowly on some of the standardized assessments, but have high grades. So there's that too, you know, so they're students that, so we're concerned about them too, right? We want them to make sure that they have the skills that they need. And it's not just a compliant learner who's handing in homework. We want all students to be critical thinkers and be able to looking at what their career goals are and everything.
Yeah.
I guess it begs the question, how do we measure how students have mastered learning? And that's, for me, that's what I'm most concerned with. How do I know a student has mastered what they're expected to learn? And then how do we show that to both the student and their families?
Thank you. So you said guidelines, that doesn't mean requirements, does it?
No guidelines, and it's a draft too, right? So the members of the committee, it was very clear. They go back to the middle and the high school, and they're gathering information at a, you know, a faculty meeting or wherever everybody is gathered as a whole group, bringing that back and drafting a set of guidelines, and then it will go back and be vetted and by the, you know, really, and again, it's all about consistency. We're just trying to make things cleaner and clearer and less confusing for our kids. And again, this is one of the things, we would not probably be having this conversation if we hadn't had this situation. This is another thing that came to light as a result of COVID.
I hate to ask the question, but I do have one. How do you enforce something like that? The consistency in making sure, and enforce might be kind of a strong word, but how do you ensure that the teachers are following the guidelines that have been implemented? That, you know, as far as all the biology teachers are allowing for late work to be submitted or not? Or how do you track that and make sure that everybody's getting a fair?
I think what we just heard was they are guidelines, they are not requirements.
I was just gonna say, that's why John asked if they were required. So right now, I mean, honestly, I'll be completely honest. The hope would be that, you know, eventually it would become part of the culture of the buildings, and that this
would be that, but I feel like it might not be. You know, I just think that, and I don't want to get into the whole grading conversation right now because it's late, but you know, I just think that the direction that you're going is the direction we should be going in, and not everyone obviously feels that way. And are we going to be hitting a brick wall again?
We know based on the exit tickets that 99% of the folks who participated in that survey are in agreement with these four things. So
what it comes down to is if a teacher's doing something different and they're getting worse results from their kids, they're doing it wrong. If a teacher's doing something different and getting better results than the guidelines, well, then they should be allowed to do whatever's working for them and their students.
Well, and what's nice, if I could just add to that, what's nice about that is when Andrew and I have looked at test scores from us, not so much this year because of COVID, it's not as accurate. But when we looked at things last year, we were able to identify teachers that had tremendous amount of growth just from one testing administration to another. And so Sue and I actually went up to the middle I shouldn't have said that. But anyway, we went to the middle school and we went and observed particular teachers because we wanted to see what was going on that was right. You know what I mean? So what instructional strategies, what things were happening in that classroom that created this dynamic atmosphere that led to higher outcomes for kids. And so that's really what we're looking to capture, is trying to look at those best practices and then get teachers to have collaborative discussions so that we can grow that.
That's why we take
Yes, you had a
instruction
question.
rounds. Yeah, two things just to kind of piggyback on what you were saying, Sue, to give a different perspective. I think especially when we get to the secondary and high school and kids that are basically adults. I mean, they're out in the working world, they're doing all these adult things. I don't know that having everything all the same all the time is really preparing them for the real world, because that's not how the real world is. I mean, you know, you get one job, you have one boss that wants something, a different boss wants something else. I mean, I don't necessarily think that that has to be a big goal. And that's a different perspective than what you just expressed, but I wanted to share that so that you can see that there's reasons why maybe it's, like, I think I have no
Oh, I
issue
totally
with
see it. I just,
suggestions and guidelines. I think if it was a requirement, we would have to have another discussion
And
about
we
that.
recognize that
You know.
students have different ways of learning things and doing things. We need to recognize that with teachers, there are different ways to be quite successful in teaching too.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I know, like, I mean, I have a student at the high school, so I see a lot of stuff from a parent perspective. This year, I think some of these things that are being talked about maybe are relevant this year, but wouldn't be relevant in a normal year. And so I'm wondering how many of these extra accommodations that we're giving to a large number of students are going to be continuing next year and the next year, because I am concerned that we're kind of setting the bar low for a lot of our kids as far as what our expectations are of them and what they can and cannot accomplish. And maybe some of that is justified during the chaos of COVID, but I don't think it's justified necessarily from here on out. So is there a delineation between saying, okay, like this year, because of everything that's gone on, we're going to accept late work longer than we did in the past. But in September, there's going to be a different standard. Or is it, this is what we're doing from here on out? Has there been that breakdown of looking, because we need to get back to something that's normal to some degree. And I'm sure that the pandemic has caused us to look afresh at some things, and maybe some of those things do need to change, but I think a lot of them don't. I think a lot of them just structurally we're not working because we had kids at home and kids in the building and all these other things going on. So I guess what is that second piece? Is that second piece being looked at, like what we're doing to get through this year versus next year we're going to structure things differently because these difficulties that some kids have this year will not exist next year.
I think there's two things going on. I think that's a discussion to be continued at the sites, and that will be ongoing, and that will be this particular committee, and that will be OTL, that will be the administration working with the staff, and especially at the middle school and the high school levels. But I think if we could turn to building in-school supports, I think these are things that we really want to have as a core and as a foundation moving forward. So I'm going to turn it back over to OTL to really explain those things, because these are things where we really hope that the kids aren't falling off the cliff, and we are continually supporting them throughout their educational experience, so that we don't have to worry about a kid having a 0, because if they're in danger of failing, or not even that, if they're struggling and they need support, they have this built into their day and into the structure. Because what we do want them to get to, and I think either Marianne or Joanne had mentioned this, hey, I really need that check-in. I really need that support. So, because even if you're an adult on a job, if you don't understand something, you need to be able to ask a question. And that's a sign of a good employee, not somebody who keeps doing it wrong and hoping that nobody notices. So if we could just talk about some of these built-in supports, because that will provide a
I think I'm going to
foundation.
move this to next month, and we can continue this next month after we've maybe had a chance to read this document and come in with questions too. Is that okay with everyone? Because we have another meeting coming up, and we really do have to stop this one. and we can move this to the next
If we can
meeting.
move it to the top of the agenda. of the next
So they can
meeting.
go first.
Yeah.
That's why you do put things in a certain place in the agenda, to make sure they're covered or make sure
So,
they're.
right, so let's make sure that makes it to the top.
It will be,
Can I ask just one thing, because if we're gonna move this and we're gonna have a larger discussion, I wanna make sure we're looking at all of the information. So I know that COVID impacted things worse. But I think that we have to be brutally honest with ourselves at what everything looks like pre-COVID. And if you look at all the statistical data, I don't think it's lowering the standards. But if 5 to 10% of your kids are failing, that would be typical. That is not our case. So I would like to see the information, because if it's, 20, 30, 40, you need to start looking at ourselves too. We may not want to provide these things, or some people may think that we shouldn't be providing these things, but we can't not reach that number of kids. So I think we have to be complacent that there's a COVID component, but that we also had a much higher percentage of failures than other high schools do. So I think if we're gonna look at it, let's look at the whole picture. What were the failure rates pre-COVID?
Pre-COVID and now.
And now, understanding that obviously COVID has ripped everything up, but we don't get to just educate a certain percentage of our kids. And I think looking at this stuff, it's looking at ways, and I don't think it's lowering the standards. I think it's meeting kids where they are. I'm hoping. I think that's what we just need to have that more conversation, because I'm not sure as a board, I'm not okay if we're reaching 60% of our kids. I don't know how everyone else on the board feels, but
I agree.
I hope that we
agree.
have to be finding ways,
To
which
support those
doesn't
kids.
mean lowering the standards. It means, how do we reach them
Right.
and how do we get there? Is it leveling classrooms? I don't know what the answer is, but I think we
It
have to
needs to
have
be
this more
addressed.
conversation other than COVID, and we don't want to do these certain things, because I think it's a much bigger discussion, because we have responsibility for these kids.
It's putting in the supports they need.
Right, and that's really
That's
what
not-
this is, and
Right.
John's right, this is a lengthier conversation
Yeah.
than we probably have time for, but I think this will definitely
now,
speak to
next
the-
month, we are done with school improvement plans.
We
so-
are for now,
So
yeah,
we will
so we'll
have a
have
lot
more
more
time.
time on
Yep.
the next,
Yep.
on the next agenda. Once we
Yep.
take care of our regular business.
Yep.
We will get to this fairly early.
Yep.
next time. Will 3 weeks be enough to prepare the information that Fiona?
Sure, because we were prepared to talk about it tonight, and you're just looking for a little bit more historical data,
points.
which we have, and we'll
You
just pull
just pull it
together.
out.
I'm just saying, I don't think
And
we
if we
should
could get
just
it
look at
sent out
COVID. I think we should
early,
look
We could
pre-COVID
get
too.
it sent early as part of the packet. The information that you're talking about.
Are you,
having ready to
yes,
go.
do you want, can I just continue to send it just to the board, or do you actually want it posted as part of the packet? those
That's a real
numbers.
good question. Let's just send it to the committee and the board.
Okay, good, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, we will send that in advance, yeah.
Great.
It's just raw data. It's not, we need to figure out.
But still, you want to
Okay.
broadcast that right now, right?
So our future meetings will include
Failure numbers are.
continued discussions, barriers to student success. We still have, if we get to them, social promotion and homogeneous versus heterogeneous grouping, which I will keep on topics for future meetings. Anyone want to suggest anything else, or is that plenty long enough for next? Okay, end of that part of the discussion. Well, we don't want to discourage people from coming. We're having good luck getting people to these meetings.
We are.
We
Yeah.
don't want to discourage them. Appreciate the participation and attention. Comments for the good of the order. I'm starting with the screen. Laura, comments for the good of the order.
I just want to say, nice job, Mayor and Joanne. Nice to hear about your schools.
Okay. Marissa, you want to tell us anything?
No, thank you.
Marissa, okay. Yes.
Thank you.
Good meeting. Thank you both for coming. It was very nice meeting you, Joanne.
It was so nice to see you in person. Thank you for the reports. They were wonderful. I know, I saw
Yeah, I
you greet
bet.
each other.
Yeah.
Ellen.
Thank you.
Yeah, great presentations and nice to see a lot of people.
Agreed.
Honey. Ronnie in person for the second meeting.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you, guys.
Allison,
Okay, thank you.
Fiona?
Just want to thank Dr. Buchanan and Ms. Creedon for their presentations, and also Claudia and Sue for helping deliver all the food yesterday.
Oh, yay.
So,
Thank you.
yeah,
I
great
slept like
help,
a
and
rock last night.
people are really.
I was driving in circles by my last delivery.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, and I think the one great thing about delivering food is that you really can get a better understanding of some of the barriers our
Yes.
students are
Mhm.
facing that
Absolutely.
you don't necessarily
Right.
get.
Yes.
So,
I think everybody should take a day and deliver.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
It
appreciate
really puts it in
everyone's
perspective.
help because it's a lot to do. So thank you.
Sure.
And Claudia and Lisa for organizing,
Mhm.
so, and the custodians for helping
Yeah.
get all the stuff together. So thank you.
Sue?
I just want to say this is a phenomenal district. Every time I hear principals share great things that they're doing with their staffs, within their community, with their students, then you have Ronnie producing drama, then you have OTL, with Ally as well. I mean, it's the whole package. And I just have to say, we talked about civic virtue here, and then we also had board members participating in their community. So it comes full circle. They're learning in K-3, they're learning as little kids. It continues on up to high school, and Robin spoke about some great things that our students always do. We always see that. Then you have board members also doing. It gives me goosebumps. I'm sorry. It gets me emotional, but I think this is an amazing community and district. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. So,
No, thank you, everyone. Thanks, Joe and Mary Ann, for coming and sharing. And thank you so much to Maureen and Andrew and Ally for being my partners in crime.
Good partners to have.
Yes.
Yes.
Maureen?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. It was a great meeting.
Thank you again, and what an honor and privilege to work side by side with Dr. Buchanan. and Ms. Creedon. Great presentation.
Yeah, enjoyed it as well, and I always love to hear what elementary is doing. And then speaking of delivery, the high school signs, I don't know if you've noticed on the lawns, the
Yes.
graduate signs are up and
Yeah.
have been delivered, and that's partnership with parents and community as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Great.
Mary?
Feel the same way, and thank you for building the foundation for us to do our jobs better than I was able to do 10 years ago. Here, so thank you.
Great meeting, thank you.
Thanks for being. You want to add anything?
I do not.
He's waiting for policy.
Ready
for the next one.
Okay, no, thank you
Papers
to
to
everybody
grade.
who
Yeah.
presented and participated and added this to the meeting. These things, very happy with these meetings. Thank you all. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.